My name is Joel Chacha, and today we focus on the state of the economy. In studio, I'm joined by three key guests. That is Honorable Amos Mwago. He is the Starry Member of Parliament and as well a member of the Trade Committee in the National Assembly. Also, Honorable Beatrice Elachi, the Great North Member of Parliament, is with us in studio. And Honorable David Kiplagat, so a Member of Parliament and a member of the Agriculture Committee in the National Assembly. But even before I get into our conversation, let's focus on this story, where President William Ruto's maiden budget is facing significant challenges as revenue targets have been reduced by 250 billion Kenya shillings, forcing the Treasury to rely more on domestic borrowing compared to external sources. With domestic borrowing set at 589 billion and external borrowing at 319 billion, there are concerns over the government's ability to meet its financial obligations. Additionally, the development budget has been slashed by 75 billion Kenya shillings, while the current expenditure has increased by 51 billion. Now, Kenyans seeking loans from local banks may face high interest rates even be denied loans altogether, as the government is considered a better client. The supplementary budgetary report was tabled on Wednesday and debated in Parliament, which has now revised President William Ruto's maiden budget by slashing 24 billion Kenya shillings from the proposed 144 billion Kenya shillings by the National Treasury.
Starting on order 95, Mr. Speaker.
The supplementary budgetary report was today tabled and debated in Parliament, which has now revised President William Ruto's maiden budget by slashing 24 billion Kenya shillings from the proposed 144 billion by National Treasury.
The business of having to do budgetary revisions thrice in a year is not very good budgetary practice.
We have to bite the bullet and go to reduce what we had budgeted for so that we are able to actually live within our means.
It is good the last supplementary budget be done at least 2 months before the end of the financial year.
However, the reduced development budget by 75 billion was a concern, despite the current expenditure increasing by 51 billion Kenya shillings.
The more we continue reducing development budget in our supplementary budgets, the more we are not helping the economy to grow.
We are reducing so much from the social side and leaving more on the defense side. And more importantly, that is where our people are suffering.
Revenue targets following projection of shortfall have now been reduced by 250 billion, causing the deficit of 900 billion in the budget to be financed more domestically. The Treasury will now borrow 589 billion locally compared to 319 billion externally, which directly affects access to loans by Kenyans.
Ambitious budgets that actually make us look for ways to raise money that sometimes actually pits us against an economy that is struggling and an economy that has been dwindling.
The Ndindi Nyoro-led committee also tabled the budget estimates for the upcoming fiscal year, which will stand at 3.91 trillion.
The budget for this financial year is 4.006 trillion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker.
The 2.9 trillion revenue targets, however, raise eyebrows of whether the revenue collecting body KRA would hit the targets despite already experiencing challenges in the current fiscal year.
The only sunshine in that, Honorable Speaker, is that over 750 billion will be going into paying domestic debt, Honorable Speaker, in terms of interest rates, and therefore this is money that could end up in the pockets of Kenyans.
The consolidated fund services will gobble 1.08 trillion Kenya shillings, in which the lion's share is meant for repayment of loans. Following a mediation on the division of revenue bill between the Senate and National Assembly, 400 billion has now been allocated to county governments. The Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung will on Thursday next week present the budget for the financial year 2024-2025 in Parliament.
Thank you, Honorable Murui.
Joel Chacha, K24 TV, Nairobi.
Well, and now to Honorable David Kiplagat. This is President William Ruto's maiden budget. The other one, you stated that you got it in, of course, still rolling. And now that he had a chance to at least ensure his budget fits his priorities, etc., what's happening? A reduction of 250 billion Kenya shillings revenue targets. What signal is this sending?
Okay. It's important that you live within your means. One of the purposes of why the reduction is that if you look at the current policy, is to reduce as much as possible on expenditure, on recurrent expenditure that is non-essential. And looking at the policy of the sagas that were told to reduce all the recurrent expenditure by 30%, so that has led to the reduction by around 240 billion. And the essence is that it has reduced on what we were supposed to borrow. So it is geared towards what we were just saying, that that in the next 2 or 3 years we shall be having a balanced budget. So every opportunity.
How realistic is it, Honorable Kiplagat? Right now, with the supplementary to budget that has the report actually was tabled by the budget committee, the fiscal deficit has shot to a record high of 908 billion Kenya shillings. How are we reducing? How will we have a balanced budget 2 years later, whereas at now we have 908 billion fiscal deficit?
Don't forget what is happening is that, as you know, we have a lot of debt, foreign debt, that we have to pay, and in the process of paying that debt, it consumes a lot of what we are generating. So as far much as we are moving, what we are doing as a government is that to reduce what we are borrowing, but to start to continue paying what we had already But are we
reducing in this case by having a 908 billion fiscal deficit? Just reversing it upwards, actually, from what the budget we had last year in June.
By the way, Chacha, you should know that in 2022-2023 budget, we had a fiscal deficit of 1.1 trillion. So
I'm focusing on the budget that President William Ruto has now operated with, reversing it upwards. Remember, it was around 700 at the beginning of the financial year. Now, 908 billion. Revenue shortfalls being witnessed. And now a slash in the targets, 250 billion. Are we doing well?
You know what? When you are preparing a budget, you don't become also over-ambitious. So sometimes you...
So who was over-ambitious in this case?
No. You constrain yourself on what is real, based on history, so that with these measures that are coming on the finance bill, if finance bill is able to be passed the way the government has proposed, then if you look at now supplementary one, it will have factored what is expected in the finance bill. So that expectation will continue reducing the fiscal deficit in our budget.
Honorable Beatrice Alachi, 250 billion revenue targets have been reduced. These, on the other hand, the fiscal deficit has increased to 908 billion, meaning this is monies that we are supposed to borrow. How is President William Ruto performing economically?
You see, number one, and that is now where Treasury has to come in. That's why we have said, if you itemize your budgets, you will get things right. And because we like, you know, I always say the details are in the content. You must reduce. And if this country wants to survive, let us just bring in a budget that is within us. Let's start from there. That's okay. But then number two, you have to now ask yourself, as you do that, how well are you bringing in the processes of collecting that revenue? Yes, you are digitizing, which is good. Bringing all the monies and sweeping the monies through e-citizen has given them a lot of money, though. You've realized they have improved so much. In a saga where they used to collect less than 2 million, in a month now they are collecting 40 million. It means there's a lot of loopholes that we've been having that we are losing revenue. And that's why when you put all Kenyans on this system, it means you'll improve your revenue. Therefore, you don't need to strain them. All you need to do is to bring in a mechanism of collecting revenue right. And if you don't strain Kenyans and leave them to do their business, then you put in a system that you want KRA to follow through properly for everyone to pay their revenues. You will never strain Kenyans. You will, in fact, you will help us now first to build the economy. And that's what Kibaki did. You improve a conducive environment for people to boom fast that economy. Then now you find yourselves, because when you look at some of the things we did in the last finance bill, you exempted so many things. Today, you have brought them back all, you have removed. So what does this business person now do? it means anyone who it starts a business in Kenya, let me say, if I am a startup entrepreneur this year, my worry is what will happen next year? And those are the things we are telling Treasury. You should stop now making people get worried that when I start something in Kenya, I don't know the future of whatever I am starting. And that is why I would rather go to Uganda, because I know their future, how it is. I'd rather go to Tanzania. Somalia is now in EACC. You can go, you can in EAC, you can go and do business there. You can do business in Rwanda. How come Rwanda is so small? But they are managing all these things. And it is so small, and the numbers are small, but they are able to collect that revenue. It's because of the mechanisms and the systems put in place, but also creating a conducive environment. The moment we are in East Africa, don't depict us to the other countries yet. You know very well Kenya has been doing very well. Everyone has been believing it was in Kenya where you would start anything. Today, what we have decided to tell them, you cannot start anything in Kenya. Well, do it outside, come and make your money in Kenya.
So the environment is not conducive, basically.
Because employment is becoming an issue. Insecurity. Look at how we have done all what we have done, which I agree, yes. We needed to remove people from the riparian lands, but how are we doing it? Are we thinking about insecurity? Fine. We are becoming good friends with many countries, with the US. Remember, we are also becoming a country security-wise, targeted, and we are hoping the security teams are also looking at that. Yes.
Well, the take-home there is about the conducive environment. And just looking at the performance of this economy, Honorable Amos Mwago, the 250 billion that has now been reduced as revenue targets, that creates a deficit, of course, in the financial year. The implication here is that the government is now focusing on borrowing 589 billion domestically compared to 319 externally, which ends up, you know, making local banks prefer the government as its client rather than MSMEs and even Kenyans. You know, speaking from a perspective of a, you know, trade committee member and as well as a member of parliament, where most businesses in the city are domiciled, is President William Ruto living to his promise of supporting hustlers access credit?
Thank you, Chacha, once again. I really want to address the issue of the revenue targets that the government came short of by 250 billion Kenya shillings. As they were proposing the last finance bill 2023-2024, the target was to collect an extra 330 billion. And if you miss that target by 250 billion, means all the tax measures that they put in place only brought in 80 billion Kenya shillings. We live in a progressive economy that is doing badly as a country because all the measures that they brought, they seem to be counterproductive. The VAT on fuel from 8% to 16% was counterproductive. The number of cars that were imported in this country, the number of fuel that was consumed went low, and that's why they did not hit their budget. That's why when you're saying a target, a revenue target of 58 billion from this car circulation, motor vehicle circulation levy, it is going to be counterproductive. People are not going to be importing those cars, and the insurance agencies are going to face a difficult time coming up with measures to make sure that all Kenyans conform, and there is going to be a wild goose chase, and we are not going to achieve these targets. So I think the president needs to get advisors around him, and we need to be realistic on how we come up with policies that are going to finance this budget. We cannot be coming up with a budget, then sit down to come up with measures on how to finance it. First of all, we need to get to a point and realize how much can we achieve from the economy without overburdening our people, so that we address the issues of budget. So you can see when the government resorts to borrowing money from domestically, it is actually competing with its own citizens. And that is very counterproductive in the business sector, because as we speak now, the interest rates that the banks are offering to the local wananchi business and businessmen in this country, it has skyrocketed to 23% up to 26%, because they have a better option to lend to in the name of the government, because the government exists in perpetuity and the government has a better collateral than most businessmen. So it only heightens the cost of doing business, and people are not allowed to access these cheap loans. If you remember how President Mwai Kibaki did revolutionize the economy of this country, he brought the banking sector down to the common mwananchi, when the cost of even opening an account then was very high. He really revolutionized the whole thing, and the banking sector came to the local. And that is how he empowered the whole middle-income earners and most sectors of this economy. And after empowering them, they came to a point that now they were able to support him by paying taxes. Now we are seeing a government that is continuing to milk a cow that it is not feeding. And at the end of the day, you know, if you continue milking a cow that you're not feeding, it is going to, the milk production is going to reduce, and one day the cow will give up. And that is where we are headed. So we need to be realistic on what we are doing. And Chacha, there's another point I really want to raise. In as much as we are collecting these taxes, in as much as we are collecting this revenue from all spheres of our economy, the other issue is the prudent management of resources in this country. We are collecting this money. We are being told that the office of the president has an allocation of an extra 1 billion shillings, which really we cannot really account for what extra role is this money going to play. Why are we increasing our current expenditure to address some of these issues, which I think do not play to the constitutions of Kenya, will to the Kenya, where we are supposed to address the fundamental issues of Kenyans under Article 43 of the Constitution, where people have access to health, education, good housing, the fundamental rights of Kenyans. We are not addressing them using this budget, and that is our role.
I'll be touching on that also later on this program. Honorable David Kiplagat, you know, President William Ruto came into office with a promise that hustlers will be able to access loans for businesses. Perhaps that's why he actually brought the Hustler Fund, but I believe the amount will never be sufficient enough to boost any MSME or business, with now a focus on borrowing more domestically, with the implications that are there. Interest rates are already high. The CBR rate is at 13%. What is the president telling Kenyans?
So maybe just to go back a little bit, you realize when we are talking about the fiscal deficit, you realize that if the Anshe government actually left this government with a bending bill of 650 billion, the one now they are verifying. And if you look at the component of that bending bill, around 100 billion goes to servicing interest on deferred payment. That is on delaying as per the contract. If you delay the payment of that contractor, there is the interest that accumulates. So what the government needs to do is that after verification of the bending bill, we need to budget so that we can be able to pay as much bending bill as possible, so that we can spur our economy, and also to reduce the government from incurring more on interest on deferred payment. So that is why you see the current pressure that we have in terms of the fiscal space. So as we look critically at what the government is doing, also note where it found itself in. It found itself in a foreign and domestic debt of around 9 trillion. It found itself with a bending bill of around 650 billion, because the Anshe government was just spending left, right, and center without caring where the money is going to come from. And that is now what we are trying to sort. So as far much we would like to get a very beautiful budget, so that those are the constraints that the government finds itself in, that it was not its creation. So if you compare with Kibaki found a debt of around 600 billion.
Perhaps this is why you are going wrong.
No, may I finish? It is equivalent with our bending bill. So that is why it was easier to jumpstart. On the issue of...
is this why perhaps you're going wrong, Honorable?
That's a very wrong way of looking at economy.
But it's an explanation I'm giving, because if you have a bending bill of 650 billion...
Yes, look at the years. Look at the years and how the shilling was performing at that time.
You have a debt.
It's the same.
You have a debt of 9 trillion.
It's the same.
You see, the hole you are in you actually have to push some measures that are a bit difficult, but we have no other ways of doing. Now, on the issue of the hustlers.
You have a agenda to that? Quickly.
No, may I finish?
It's just a point of order.
In fact, I didn't.
I really need to bring to you.
I didn't interview Honorable Amos when he said that he comes from the mountain, and I didn't see any mountain in Starehe constituency. So I wanted to interfere, but I said let me finish. So
let me bring Mheshimiwa to speed in terms of what he's saying and the blame on what he calls the handshake government. But I think you also need to understand that as of when you took power, as from 22nd of June, the year 2022, and up to now, our public debt has moved from 8 trillion to 10.5 trillion, 5 trillion. So in 2 years, you borrowed 2.5 trillion. Yeah, and you're telling us that you found yourself in a hole. Why did you continue digging? You're already in the hole. So you came on board on the promise that you are going to turn around the economy, but you came to do worse than what was happening. And this.
Honorable Amos is saying is not factual in terms of figures. Because.
No. Give us the figures.
Yeah. Because
give us the figures if at all you are differing. Because I understand the public debt to the GDP. What's the percentage as at now? It's already a distress. Around 68%.
No, we are still comfortable. We are not bad.
No, but the threshold is actually 55% plus or minus 5. That's the ceiling that is there.
But I think we have changed the ceiling, so we are still.
The debt anchor is 55% plus or minus 5.
We are not badly off. What I wanted to answer is, when we took over, we were paying the debt in our annual budget of around 1.1 trillion that we are supposed to pay outside, which you collect and pay. So you reach a point whereby if you sum up those things that you are supposed to pay. You are supposed to pay in the national, the debt. You are supposed to pay the counties. So when you sum up, you realize you have no money to spend on anything. So but what happens is, you see, you cannot bury someone and then you expect by miracles to just come out.
Even as all of us are leaders,
but what you need to realize is that we have now reduced what we are borrowing internationally from 1.1 trillion. Now we are in 900. Next year we shall be in 600. And we are coming down like that. So we are making progress.
But we are borrowing domestically. It's still loans.
No, but the fiscal debt is both domestic and foreign.
But the impact of
what I'm saying is
all aware of
when we were taking over the deficit, the fiscal debt, the fiscal deficit was 1.1 trillion. That is not in contention. Right now, we are in 900 billion. I'm saying by next year, we shall be in 700.
But we are borrowing more domestically, hence, you know, it becomes tough for Kenyans to access credit. That's what I'm talking about.
Chacha, you know, budget, why citizens felt in the Constitution that Parliament can be the body that can reorganize budgets, ensure they budget well for the country, and now give the executive. Yes, the executive will bring proposals, but Kenyans never expected with this new constitution that, again, we shall be following everything. We can guide the executive. Let us guide the executive and say, this is how the country is. If the executive goes and decides either way, then that should not be the blame of Parliament. But what has happened is that as parliamentarians, we are now refusing to do our duties, and we decide to push. And then we come and say the executive. It's not the executive. It is us who have refused to be courageous enough to say what is right and what is wrong. All of us are leaders. When you tell me you found a hole, you cannot tell me in your constituency now you found a hole and you are going in a hole. No. When you were taking over that constituency, you knew the challenges you were going to face in. And there's no way when the next member who will come after even me can come and start telling me he's going to build schools, he's going to be. This is the challenge we are facing in Kenya. On the from ourselves to the top.
On the decisions that are being made, for instance, development expenditure being slashed by a whooping 75 billion Kenya shillings, whereas the recurrent expenditure increases by 51 billion.
Now that's where we are going wrong. That's why I'm saying, first of all, we've been hit by floods. Now we have removed development, but recurrent, we are still improving. Why? We have to, if we are putting the belt should go on recurrent. We should be pushing completely that recurrent must be minimized to even 30%. In every ministry, let 70% go for development.
Quickly, Honorable Mwago.
I would want to weigh in on that issue because this is an issue that we should look at even for posterity. We need to address the issue of current expenditure in this country. We cannot have in our budget that we have like over 70% goes to recurrent expenditure at 1.5 trillion, and we only have a development budget of over 700 billion. That means that a team that costs 1.5 trillion is going to manage resources half in the budget of its expenditure, which is not a prudent way of doing business. So, and I think as a country, some of these issues that the government is doing really need to be rethought. We need to ask ourselves, what is the rush with trying to impress external agencies and other institutions in the name of saying that we are able to collect more? You know, what is happening is the revenue regime collection is like what you call in your workplace your pay slip. And this is what most of the banks guarantee you to give you a loan. What Kenya is doing is trying to improve its pay slip in the name of collecting more revenue from KRA. And so that is why we are attracting so much confidence from borrowers who are very ready to lend to us, because we are showing our capability to borrow more from to raise more revenue from the people. And this is counterproductive because we are hurting our people in the name of trying to impress other people. And this money that you are borrowing is not being accounted for. We cannot see significant development. I want to say, in what they refer to as handshake government, there are serious projects that we've seen in this country. The roads are done by Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta's government. The hospitals were done. Everywhere, everything has been done. This government has been left with nothing to do. Let me finish. This government has been left with nothing to do, and with 2 years of its operation, there's nothing significant, even a significant road that we can see that has been launched.
At that juncture, when we come back after the break, I'll be giving Honorable David Kiplagat a chance to give a rejoinder to actually what has been stated here by Honorable Amos Mwago. Keep the conversation going via social media platforms at K24 TV, Joel Chacha, as well on our SMS and WhatsApp numbers on the bottom of your screens. When we come back, we'll also be focusing on the budget estimates for the next financial year.